As Emily alluded to, the simple view of reading, the word simple is very misleading. Reading is very complex, as we know. And I think in terms of the brain, I can talk for hours about the brain and how it's related to reading, but I think just some key kind of concepts here is that reading, and maybe you've heard this over and over again, but for those who might not know, reading is a recent invention in evolutionary history. It's been invented 6,000 years ago, plus or minus. So we don't really have a brain that's innately wired to read, and you have to learn learn as you go and use our current systems that we have that's more innate and more evolutionary old, like sound processing, visual processing, attention, and these kind of systems, and we co-opt them and train them so that you can learn to read. So so that needs to happen, and it's very critical that there's significant kind of practice and exposure so that you can rewire sort of your brain and attune it to read. So that's kind of one key aspect. And then the other key aspect is some scientists believe that the current sort of latest hypothesis is, and I'll get to simple view of reading and connect it later, but is that there's no, related to this fact that there's no innate system for reading, that what happens is there's a central kind of commander or a sort of conductor who orchestrates sort of in the brain that sits at the very top hierarchically, and it's known as a cognitive control system or domain general kind of system. And it says, now you have to learn to read. So I'm going to need you to get together the visual attention system, the letter or symbol kind of processing network of the brain, sort of more related to visual processing, and the speech processing, and you have to all coordinate and then try to figure out how to read. So that's what needs to happen, and that's what people currently believe in terms of the latest science. So there's some central kind of executive pieces also important, speech processing and other pieces are important. Now kind of combining these together, and as you're learning to read, I happen to have, I don't always carry it around, but I do often these days. I happen to have a brain here, so I'm going to use this. I use it for a lot of these kids classes that I have. And so I have this anatomically accurate brain, which I love. It drives me crazy when it's not accurate. But so this is a brain, it sits like this. So often when you see a picture, you see the left hemisphere of the brain. You use both hemispheres when you're learning to read or processing language, but let's just assume focus on the left hemisphere, which is more dominant for language and kind of literacy in general in adults. But there's one system called the dorsal system, and the dorsal means back. And you might think, oh, it's the top of your brain. Why is it the back of your brain? That's because when you think about animals that you walk on fours, if you try walking on fours or think about babies, the dorsal part is sort of, as you, it's more, you lift your head, so it becomes, the back becomes your top of your head. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm explaining it right. And then the ventral system is sort of the back that starts from the visual system and goes all the way to the front. And ventral means stomach. And that's also from the times when you think about the animals, you think that the stomach part aligns with the bottom of the brain. So, so that's why we call it the dorsal system and ventral system. But the dorsal system is important for phonological processing, kind of more sound related, decoding, linking symbols and sounds. And then this ventral system is very important for meaning, lexical access, and especially when you become an automatic reader, you start using the bottom part, the ventral pathway. So the decoding part, the dorsal pathway, you use that originally when you're learning to read more heavily, and you really have to train up that system to be able to train up the bottom part, the ventral system, the more language, kind of semantic processing and automatic fast access to words and meaning. And there's a computational model suggests that there's a two-way highway in a way, that there's a reciprocal connection, interaction between the two systems. And that is very important and needs to work in tandem as you're learning to read. So that's kind of, it really works well with some of you have seen the rope that's kind of mingled between, or knotted sort of between the decoding system and the comprehension system, and it works that way in terms of the brain as well. There's a connection, and there's constantly communicating each other, and both are absolutely necessary for you to become a good reader.